What's up, AP Psych? Welcome to your first lecture in social psychology and personality. This is a unit that covers a ton of big topics, but really just a little bit of a lot. So it's still, it's probably going to feel overwhelming like these tend to, but I think you'll like it. I think you'll find it interesting. It's a fairly fun unit. Our first topic today is social thinking and perception. So we're going to look at how um, the fact that we're social animals living amongst other people impacts the way we think. Okay. Oh, before I get too deep, I also want to mention this is a unit that's going to go heavy on examples. Please, please, please pay attention to examples. Write some down, add your own. That's going to really help you tell the difference between some of these terms. All right. Learning targets, quite a lot, but it shouldn't feel too bad. I don't think. Okay, social psychology in general. This is a scientific study of how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. Okay, that's the field of social psychology. But within social psychology, in this lecture, in this unit, or this topic, we are going to focus on social cognition. So, social thinking. These are the mental processes associated with the ways in which people perceive and react to others. So, how we form impressions of ourselves and others, how we explain actions of our own and others, how we define and compare ourselves to others, and how we categorize others. Some of these will be in this lecture and some of these will repeat themselves in other lectures. You don't need to write down all of those bullet points, but I would probably jot down those bold ideas. It'll help you frame this in your head. There's this unit's also full of theories. The first major theory we're going to talk about is going to focus on the process of explaining the causes of behavior. This is called attribution theory. And when you're trying to explain why someone did that, why you did this thing, why you accidentally deleted your entire video that you filmed an hour ago, like I just did, was it because of the situation? Or was it because of your disposition or your personality? So, for example, I'm actually refilming this because it was all done and I accidentally hit delete. I would blame the situation on external factors. I had gotten a text message, I hit what I thought was edit or save, and I accidentally hit edit, and then instead of pause, I hit delete. So I just explained my situation as to why I did what I did. Other people might say, no, you're too distracted. You did that impulsively. You didn't stop to think something through. Like they're going to maybe blame, or maybe I'll say this about myself, they're going to blame my personality. That's a dispositional attribution. Internal factors, like someone's level of intelligence or friendliness or attention to detail and being careful with their work. Now remember, I said examples are really important in this unit. So I want you to go back to the situational and dispositional part of your notes, and I want you to add your own example of an attribution. Let's say you just got an A plus on your test. Woohoo! Way to go. Give yourself in your notes a situational attribution for why you got that A and a dispositional attribution, and then we'll share those in class to make sure we got the hang of it. Attribution theory is also studies the influence of culture. In individualistic, westernized cultures like the United States and Western Europe, people more often attribute behavior, actions, and actions to traits, internal dispositional reasons. So you did that thing because you're like that, and that's what you do. So we pay a lot of attention to the self. In collectivist Eastern cultures, places like Asia, and the Middle East, they more often attribute circumstances because it's about the whole community. And so maybe someone did well in an individualistic culture, someone did well on a test because they're super smart. They're like that. They're so lucky. In a collectivist culture, they might say it's because they have nurturing parents and great teachers that help support them getting that A. Okay, so culture has an influence as to how we attribute behaviors. In general, the way we think and the patterns we fall into with the way we attribute behaviors influence each other. Okay, this one, I didn't really know where to put this topic, but I'm putting it here. Attributions themselves don't necessarily have to be good or bad. They probably do fall into a pattern, but those patterns of thinking can lead to either pessimistic or optimistic explanatory styles. So, what we mean by this is how you justify good or bad life events. So, you totally know the type. I know you know the type. Do you think of someone who's always happy, who can always see the bright side of things? That would be someone with an optimistic explanatory style. But then there's always that complainer, that person that always sees something as wrong or negative or something to complain about. Okay, they have a pessimistic explanatory style. But a lot of times, our explanatory styles and our attribution styles are linked to our perception of control. Do we think a situation or our life in general is dictated by fate and it's out of our hands and we're just what happens happens? Or is it internal that we have some influence on what happens to us? So, external locus of control. Chance or outside forces determine fate. You did well on that test because you guessed lucky. You happened to get a good night's sleep. You happened to feel like your mind was sharp and you made good guesses. Okay. Internal locus of control. You did well on this test because you worked really hard and you're a hardworking person who studied well, you learned good strategies, and you made this happen. Ask yourself which is better psychologically, which one leads to more pessimistic or optimistic thinking. And as you think about that, jot a note down to yourself or not, but we'll talk about that in class. Attribution theory also includes the study of certain biases that our brains tend to, or like cognitive mistakes that our brains tend to make. I'm going to do this in a little bit of a specialty way. In your notes, I provided you all of these definitions, but I also provided you a chart. And so I'm going to read you the definition. I'm going to talk you through the chart and what the examples you should fill in. And then I'll flip to my final version of the chart at the end so you can fill it in. But I want you to like match a definition with like a comparison and an example. So here we go. Let's give this a shot. Okay, fundamental attribution error. This is our tendency to underestimate the impact of a situation and overestimate the impact of personal disposition. So, looking at your chart, here's your example. Imagine someone cuts you off on the road. If you make the fundamental attribution error, you're going to underestimate that maybe they had an emergency. Maybe they have to get someplace really, really fast. It's super important. But you're probably not going to think like that. You're probably going to overestimate the impact of their personal disposition and be like, man, they are a total jerk. What's the problem? That's the fundamental attribution error. Okay. Actor observer bias. This is the tendency to attribute our own actions to external situational factors while attributing those of other people to internal dispositional personality based factors. So let's go to the example. I'll get back to this bullet point. The example in your chart. Let's say you get into a fight with your bestie. If you're trying to justify your actions, you might think like, man, I didn't sleep well the night before. I just took a hard test. Maybe I'm hungry. So I'm cranky based on my circumstances. I didn't really mean to hurt her feelings or his feelings. Okay. But if you're trying to explain their actions, you might just say, you know what? They are totally self-centered. They don't care about me anyways. They're just not a good friend. So, actor observer bias, you're more likely to blame someone's personality if you're blaming someone else's actions, but you're more likely to blame situation if you're talking about your own. Why? Well, because we know our circumstances. We know if there's reasons for why we acted the way we did. We don't know that about other people, so we just make these broad-based claims about their personalities. And finally, self-serving bias. This is the tendency to attribute one's successes to internal dispositional factors and one's failures to external situational factors. So let's say that you are playing a game for your sport. Let's say it's soccer. Well, let's say your team lost. If your team lost, and that means you feel a sense of failure, you're more likely to blame situational reasons like the ref is totally favoring the other team. It's the ref's fault, something outside of yourself, or it was really dark, or it was really cold. And so all these things set us up for failure, but it's not our fault. But if you succeed, you win. Yay, you're awesome. You're more likely to say something like, hey, we won because we're awesome. We're a great soccer team. We're great soccer players. We work hard. We're good people. We earned it. All together, here's what I just went through. Feel free to hit pause and fill in your notes if you didn't follow along as I was explaining it. Okay, next category is social influences on perception. So, what is going on around us that makes us interpret something one way or another? First concept is the mere exposure effect. This is the idea that repeated exposure to someone or something, so any stimulus, increases one's liking of them. So, in other words, familiarity brings a sense of comfort and liking to something. So think of the first time you heard a song that and your initial instinct was like, ugh, I hate this. But as you hear the song over and over, at some point you're like, you know what? It's growing on me. I seem to like it. We might say that about a person. You know what? I didn't like them at first, but the more I got to know them, the more I started to like them. Okay. I have a picture of Aladdin here because we also know an example like that. This is really an example. How am I trying to say this? That this is why children, this is why children like to read the same book or watch the same movie or eat the same food over and over again. It can kind of be annoying to the adults, but for me it was Aladdin. I loved Aladdin. I loved the story, I loved the songs, I loved the dialogue, and I would watch this one endlessly because it's familiar, it's safe, it makes you feel good and calm inside. The next idea is the false consensus effect. This is when people overestimate that their opinions and preferences and habits are the ones that are normal or typical, that everyone's beliefs are the same as yours. And we tend to be shocked when they're not. So for me, I don't understand why someone wouldn't like peanut butter cups. They're my favorite candy. Of course, everybody likes peanut butter cups. How could you not? Because we feel so strongly. Our perception is that other people would agree with us, or that penguins are the best animal. Duh. But in a more serious example, sometimes we believe that the person we are voting for will win an election, and we are shocked when they don't. Because we think most people would agree with us that our candidate's the best. They've got the best ideas, they're the most hopeful, they're going to steer the country or the city in the best direction. And we feel so strongly that we can be shocked. We maybe even think our vote's not necessary because everyone's going to vote this way. And we might be shocked when the outcome is not in our favor. And then, not finally, but next is the self-fulfilling prophecy idea. This one's a little tricky, but I also think it's kind of cool. It's not a cool thing, but I think it's a cool concept. I don't know. A psych nerd moment. This is when a person's expectations or beliefs about a situation leads to their own actions or behaviors that make those expectations come true. So, in other words, your behaviors around another person, if you think they perceive you a certain way, confirms those beliefs. This one I definitely understand better with the examples. Imagine that a player, sports ball player, thinks that a coach hates them. And so then they don't get along with their coach and they don't try very hard at practice because what's the point? The coach hates me anyways. Well, guess what? The coach is going to start to dislike you. So your behaviors around that coach confirmed these beliefs that maybe the coach didn't even have. And now the coach doesn't like you. But this can be there can be a positive spin here. You can feel that you're a good fit for a job, and so you go to the interview with confidence, and then you get the job because you went in there like you knew your stuff and you felt really good about it. So your perception of yourself influence your actions to make that idea about yourself come true. And then I believe this is the final topic on social influences on perception, and that is the idea of the social comparison theory. We as humans are always driven to evaluate ourselves, usually by comparing ourselves to others. We might look downward at people who are below us or at a lower status than us, and we might look at those people and say, like, man, when I look at how hard they have it, I actually feel gratitude for my own life. But other times you might look down at people and be like, oh, like what's wrong with them? And you might look at them with like disgust or judgment. But we also might look upward at people who seem to have a better or higher status than us, in which case they might serve as hope or inspiration, or it might leave us feeling a sense of jealousy or envy or dissatisfaction with our own lives. And unfortunately, that tends to be true more often than not because of the concept of relative deprivation. So this is the perception that you are worse off relative in comparison to those you have chosen to compare yourself to. So one of those ideas that no matter who you look to, you're always going to be able to find something that someone else has that you don't, or someone else has achieved that you haven't yet. And it tends to leave us feeling kind of crummy. No matter what we achieve in our own lives, relatively speaking, we can always find something lacking within ourselves. All right, last topic, and that is persuasion. So this is totally social thinking. This is when someone's trying to get you to change the way your attitude is about something, or you are trying to get somebody else's attitude to change, or get them to do something, buy something, agree with you about something. So we know what persuasion is. But the elaboration likelihood model takes a look at like what makes that more likely or less likely that we could get someone to change their mind. So this elaboration likelihood model is how people process information, is the way people process information can influence the likelihood that their attitude will be persuaded. So this depends on a couple different things, mostly how invested they are in a topic. But what I mean by that is the topic personally relevant and immediate? So you might care a lot about a policy that Pius is designing, but you're probably not going to care that much about a policy that's happening at your friend's high school. Who cares? It doesn't affect you. It's not immediately impacting your life. Something that we have pre-existing knowledge of. Do you know the background about why you should be persuaded or what you should be convinced of? Are you starting from scratch? And is it something you want to give time and attention to that you do actually care about? When we study persuasive techniques, we also look at what we would call the route of persuasion. And this takes one of two directions. The central route of persuasion is what we would consider direct persuasion. That attitudes change when interested people focus on the scientific evidence and arguments, like the proof. So the central route of persuasion is when you carefully weigh the pros and cons, the facts, the benefits and the costs, like no frills, no emotions, just what are the pros and cons of a decision? Okay. The peripheral route of persuasion is also known as the indirect way of persuasion, and that attitudes change when people make snap judgments on incidental cues, like the attractiveness of a speaker. So here, maybe you're less concerned about the benefits or the costs or the pros and the cons, and it's just like, well, Jennifer Garner is my favorite actress, and she promotes the Venture Capital One card, so I'll like it too. We also call this the halo effect, and I just realized I don't have the definition in here. So the halo effect is basically when we associate something with something else that we already like, then we like everything else about it. So if your favorite movie star or singer or whatever promotes an idea that because you like them, you'll like that idea or you'll agree with that idea. That's why a lot of famous people actually have more responsibility as role models than they might want because people get so attached to supporting them that they're going to support their ideas and likes and dislikes as well, regardless of the facts of the thing. Our approach to persuasion can also impact the likelihood of someone being convinced. And that is either the foot in the door phenomenon or the door in the face phenomenon. The foot in the door phenomenon is the tendency for people who agree to a small request to comply with a large one. So let's say you want to go on a trip with your friends to spring break and like your parents are going to say no. Maybe you actually start by just asking for like, hey, can we just go away for the weekend and can we take a road trip? And if you can get them to agree to that, maybe you can say like maybe for a whole week. Maybe can we fly someplace? So you ask for something small in order to get agreement to something big. And then the door in the face phenomenon is actually the opposite. Asking first for something huge, and then when denied, you actually ask for something less, which is probably what you wanted in the first place. So maybe you ask your parents, hey, can I go on that 2 week spring break trip to Paris? And they're going to be like, no. But then you say, oh, okay, well, what about just like a week in Florida? Okay, well, we can at least consider it. Okay, there you go. So these are some other ways that we try to persuade people. Okay, we will practice these concepts and go over them and all that good stuff in class, but there you have it, social thinking and perception.